Welcome to this brief yet efficient Jujutsu Kaisen discussion video with the recent events of Jujutsu Kaisen 251 having Megumi refuse to take his body back from Sukuna upon Yuji entering the domain of his soul. I've seen primarily two takes surrounding this event and the repercussions of Megumi's choice. One take is that Megumi's actions are understandable due to all that he's been through, and the other side disagrees with Megumi's actions despite what he's been through. Both sides are reasonable, and when you really think about it, they can both be right. But after having a couple of days to sit down and really think about what Megumi has been through, I've come to a clear answer as to how I feel about Megumi's decision here. And in this video, I'll be talking about Megumi's character and aspects of him that led me up to my answer, and then sharing the conclusion that I've come to. With that being said, this is more of an examination of Megumi and what I think of his decision rather than an analysis. And if you enjoy content such as this, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe. Now, let's get into it. As we all know, the most important aspect of Megumi's character and the foundation of his purpose and actions within the series is his stepsister, Tsumiki Fushiguro. Despite her mother passing away and Megumi's father abandoning them, they remained at home with one another due to being the only thing that the other had in the world. So understandably, with Tsumiki being all that's left for him, he'd prioritize her and her well-being more than anything else. Choosing to become a Jujutsu sorcerer and train under Gojo, best described as his adopted big brother, all for the sake of Tsumiki's well-being. And really, this was the sole factor in Megumi either becoming a sorcerer under Gojo's care or going to the Zenin family. As he asks, what will happen to Tsumiki? If we go there, will Tsumiki be happy? My answer depends on that. Tsumiki means everything to him, or at least when he was a child, and we can really see this through his behavior. This behavior carries on throughout the story for the most part, but it really sticks out the most during the Culling game with many of Megumi's actions. In every chapter that Megumi appears in after Shibuya, you can feel an overbearing air of desperation surrounding him due to the possibility of saving Tsumiki. As Megumi finds out that the Culling game is really the only way he can protect her, he becomes very desperate to enter and accumulate points. When it came to recruiting Hakari and Kiara to their cause, he performed a Doggiza bow after defeating Kiara, which is supposed to express that he truly wants Kiara's help from the bottom of his heart, and it's just out of character for Megumi to do things like this. Not only that, but when Reggie explains his plan to Megumi in order to combat Kenjaku's plan after accurately predicting it, Megumi demands that Reggie and his team give him all of their points and instantly summons his Shikigami, signaling that he'll take it by force. From my perspective, Reggie truly wasn't going to battle Megumi without a strong reason. Reggie makes it clear to us from the start that Megumi's 5 points wasn't worth the trouble that he gave them, but as Megumi feels that he must save Tsumiki by any means necessary at this point, since the stakes surrounding her are so high, he doesn't really care to even attempt to negotiate and find a middle ground, and just wants to get the points as fast as possible from them. Megumi's desperation and lack of control due to the circumstances given to him result in the infamous curse from Reggie to Megumi at the end of their deadlock, seeming to serve as a cautionary tale from Gege himself, as he truly was toyed with by fate, and as of now, it's likely that he'll die like a fool. Or, if you want to interpret this quote in a metaphysical sense, you could say that Megumi has already died like a fool, as in the person he was once, due to Tsumiki and Gojo both being eliminated by Sukuna, and him being left a shell of his former self. We'll just have to see once he reaches his true conclusion. Another aspect of his relationship with Tsumiki that I don't see spoken about is how we see that Megumi romanticizes Tsumiki as if she were this perfect angel that's done no wrong, as he uses her as the primary example of a good person whenever he speaks about her, and from what I've seen, Tsumiki being this perfect person just wasn't the case. Now hear me out on this, but I even believe the story punished Megumi for this perspective on her. We see in a flashback during the Origin of Obedience arc that they argue over Megumi fighting in school, say quite mean things to one another, and that Tsumiki herself isn't as perfect of a person that Megumi makes her out to be, as she instantly throws something at him when Megumi says that she grosses him out. They were both very troubled children with no parental guidance, and you can see this by how quickly they lash out toward one another, yet Megumi just seems to forget this, and reasonably so. It's important to reiterate that he had no parental figures in his life, and from my own experience, I would never consider Gojo as such, as he fits more of a big brother type of role model rather than a father. Not only that, but Tsumiki was Megumi's entire world due to him losing her. Not to say that she was the only thing he cared about during the time he was present in the story, but it's more so since Megumi had everything else and he lost her, he was obviously going to miss her the most and do anything to get her back. That's just how it is. People don't know what they have until it's gone. I say all of this extra stuff to say that Megumi, as hurt as he is by the loss of Tsumiki, is reasonable and logical. She was all he had for a long time, and when she was around, they seemed to not get along as well as I thought they did initially. At the point of the culling game, all Megumi wants to do is save her, apologize, and appreciate her for who she was. Tsumiki's death is not the only factor in Megumi's unwillingness to continue though. We can also mention the irony and brutality in which Sukuna used Megumi's body to execute Yorozu, who was inhabiting Tsumiki's body, which is likely the last thing he's ever wanted to happen. Then the worst case scenario only got worse. Sukuna using the bat to amplify Megumi's despair, the Shinjuku Showdown arc having Sukuna cut down most of the cast including his big brother Gojo himself. Megumi has certainly been through a lot and powerless to stop it. So if that's the case, why are people upset with Megumi's decision to not act despite being left a shell of his former self, begging for it all to end? Isn't it reasonable for him to not want to do anything here? Well, I agree with this. That's certainly a reasonable reaction, and I don't think anybody has ever said otherwise. The mass disapproval of Megumi's decision to not continue does not stem from whether or not it's an understandable or reasonable action, but it's the action itself. Megumi choosing to lay down and waste away because of his pain and failures when the lives of his friends and many more are at stake is something readers are not going to support or like. And I personally think that's okay. People all have different perspectives and have led different lives than the next, and with that said, I want to lead into why I personally find Megumi's inability to continue, at least at this very moment, to be a disappointment. I'm not criticizing the writing here, as it's great and makes sense, but rather Megumi himself for being a weak character. I personally find Megumi's inability to continue to be disappointing of him because he's refused to allow Yuji to sacrifice himself and has always been seeking a way to keep Yuji alive for as long as possible despite the demon that resides within him. Even when Yuji and Megumi both discover that Sukuna was the fallen when negotiating with Angel, Yuji instantly jumps to sacrificing himself for Gojo's return, whereas Megumi is already considering Yuji's willingness to sacrifice himself as a problem that he needs to deal with, not allowing that to be an answer. Even without this example, there are a few more that show us that Megumi wasn't going to let Yuji sacrifice himself no matter what, and that he was always going to seek an alternative even if Yuji got all 20 fingers. He's wanted to keep Yuji alive with the risk of Sukuna taking over and doing all of the horrible things that he's done now, and with the risk of their plans of saving everybody going wrong due to whatever else Kenjaku and Sukuna were cooking up, despite knowing how essential Yuji and his life were to Sukuna and Kenjaku's plans going through. He still wanted to keep Yuji alive. There's a tiny bit of responsibility with Megumi when it comes to Sukuna, however, that's not really the point I'm getting to. The only person that's truly close to him is fighting tooth and nail against a walking calamity to save him, and when presented with the opportunity to basically end it all there, he couldn't do anything, and I found that disappointing. Megumi's currently at a point where he's lost Tsumiki and Gojo due to Sukuna, and he's given up, allowing Sukuna to potentially take the last person very dear to him, rather than putting up a semblance or really anything that involves one last fight despite all he's lost. There was no way that Megumi could ever prepare for what happened to Tsumiki involving Sukuna taking over his body and defeating Yorozu, and I can't tell you how he'd feel about keeping Yuji alive if he was aware of those events potentially happening, but that doesn't matter at this point. With the world at stake, he's just witnessing everything that his friends are going through in order to save him, rather than outright eliminating Sukuna and calling it a day. Yet, he didn't attempt to find the strength to take the hand that they're lending to him and finish the job. Megumi has almost lost everybody very dear to him, and he was going to allow Sukuna to take the last person that he has, whereas if anything, he should be fighting with the same desperation to salvage what he has left, and this isn't even including the entire world being at stake currently. Choosing to lay down and cry, I find that weak of Megumi, but then again, Megumi's will could be much weaker than usual due to the effects of the bath. However, I don't think that was truly made explicitly clear, so I won't consider it for now. If it does play a role though, I'm aware of how bad events and negative feelings can amplify one another, and my thoughts on the situation will be more lenient. And I'm also not saying he has a bad character, only that the decision he's made here and now was pretty weak, especially considering the stakes at hand and what he has left. With that being said, this is really how I interpreted Megumi's decision, his character, and my thoughts on it. However, my opinions are not absolute, And he's still 15 years old, so I understand that he's more vulnerable to irrational decision making, and Megumi stands out for this, so it's probably worse than most people's. I guess not saving himself is consistent with all that we've seen from the series, but if there's one time he needs to do it, it needs to be now. With that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed the yap session and less cohesive video, and I'll catch you all in the next one.